The worst map design of all time, a completely underwhelming boss fight, a totally lackluster conclusion to Cold War Zombies. After Mauer the Totem managed to breathe new life into Cold War Zombies, hype in the community was at an all-time high as the game reached its climax with Forsaken. What was it going to offer players? Incredible wonder weapons, great nostalgic callbacks and strong story reveals? Sure, many fans would agree that that is exactly what they got. But tragically, it came intertwined with some of the strangest decisions of all time. And so very quickly it became immediately obvious to fans as they arrived at one important question: what the hell happened here? Although there are unfortunately many serious problems with Forsaken, luckily that statement 100% does not apply to the map's wonder weapon, the Chrysalax, because it could well be one of the best of all time. It's a genuine shame that this incredible piece of weaponry can only be found in an experience with so many issues. But let's not get too negative, this is the good section after all. The Chrysalax is essentially two weapons in one, starting off as a melee axe made purely from Ethereum crystals known as the Savager, but it can also be rearranged into a rapid-firing SMG style weapon called the Storm that rips through the undead. And both are incredibly useful in very different situations. Although it may initially seem like the Savager is totally broken and way too overpowered, only requiring you to constantly swing it in order to clean out the zombies, this is actually not totally true. Sure, I'm not going to sit here and say that this axe is anything other than extremely powerful. However, it does actually require a little bit of skill and knowledge, with players needing to learn the timing patterns of the swing in order to make sure they land in order to stop them being overwhelmed by the horde. Don't get me wrong, it's something that's extremely unlikely to happen, but if that is something players do end up struggling with, they have the option to switch to the Storm SMG, which operates much more like a standard weapon with far less risk. But it's important to note that although that thing is still incredibly powerful, it's not on the level of the Savager, which makes total sense because that is the version of this wonder weapon that can cause players far more problems if they don't remain focused. Like many wonder weapons in the more modern era of COD Zombies, there are a number of different ways to get hold of the Chrysalax, with the most consistent of course being a mini quest. Now let's get one thing straight, there are certain steps of this challenge which are genuinely cool, namely having to kill tons of enemies around this crystal in order to get hold of it, and also needing to get melee eliminations as the final stage to reveal this glorious weapon. And yes, I know this is the good section, but I've got to mention how annoying that abomination part is. Needing one of these huge beasts to fire their electricity bolt at you in order to break open a crystal and give you what you need can be so frustrating and time consuming, and to be honest, I'm just not here for it. On certain occasions you're dealing with pure RNG waiting for an abomination to spawn, and that kind of thing can become so tedious. But with that said, the annoyance of that step is nowhere near enough to make the Chrysalax anything other than one of the coolest wonder weapons of all time. And it's an absolute must on Forsaken, as nothing else even comes close to the Savager's ability to wipe out zombies. In my eyes, it's got to be the most impressive thing about this whole experience by an absolute mile. But interestingly, one of the first things you see in the entire experience of Forsaken is also a huge positive. It's not very often that a spawn area stands out as something truly incredible about a COD Zombies map, but this is 100% the case here. This is easily the best one in the whole of Cold War, and to be honest, it's probably got 90% of other Zombies experiences beat too. This thing is hectic, as it doesn't work like a normal zombie spawn room at all, and very much feels like a huge throwback to Moon. Rounds progress at breakneck speed and the zombies just keep coming. It's a pretty wild way to introduce players to Forsaken, and it works perfectly. Because essentially, you have to make the choice on how long this madness lasts. Find it a bit overwhelming, then no need to stick around, you can teleport pretty much immediately into the main part of the map. Or if you're feeling a little bit adventurous, stay strong and slay the undead. If you stick it out for long enough, you could end up with enough points to open up the entire map and get yourself set up for the game ahead. It is extremely rare to see something as cool as this as soon as you drop into a zombies experience, and for the obvious reasons it can't be done all the time or it would just become boring. But to see this kind of feature back was amazing and really felt like a brilliant dose of nostalgia for those who remember the chaos of spawning in at Groom Lake and having to survive the madness. The amazing callbacks don't stop there though, because one of the most obvious has got to be the addition of Burger Town. I don't think many people would disagree with the fact that one of the most controversial and hated modes in the franchise has got to be exo-zombies from Advanced Warfare. It was despised for a wide variety of reasons, but none more so than the infection map often called Burger Town. Well, amazingly, it's back in Forsaken for some reason. It even comes with the famous mascot Bubby, but don't worry, even though Forsaken may have some serious problems, this is just a funny throwback reference. You're not going to find yourself escorting any survivors around this map, thank God. It's also not the only nostalgic reference in the map though, as you can find others with the amazing arcade token system. This is such a cool addition and provides some genuinely brilliant side content. Simply get hold of a token through various methods, including a drop from zombies or perhaps even shelling out 10,000 points. And you can then interact with different arcade machines to play certain games, from obstacle courses with RC cars to some way more impressive references. They include being transported to a Drak themed area where you have to wipe out zombies in order to unlock a loot chest. But even better than that is when players get sent to actual Nocta and Toten to take on the Horde to grab themselves some upgrades. Sure, we may have seen a rebooted version of Noctin D Machine, but this feels like more of a throwback to the classic original from World at War. Outside of the Chrysalax, this really feels like one of the most unique things that Forsaken offers players, and I honestly believe it's a truly top level feature. Sadly though, top level features really aren't something you'll find in abundance in Forsaken, because it really does miss the mark in a number of respects, leading to what many fans see as one of the most frustrating zombies experiences in the modern era. Strap in, because things are about to get rough. For a COD Zombies map to reach the dizzying heights of greatest of all time, it essentially needs to have the full package, which often consists of various things from a great wonder weapon to some unique side content, and yes, Forsaken does have those things, but unfortunately it's lacking in nearly every other department, with one of the most important being the map's layout. The community has dealt with a wide variety over the years, ranging through various levels of love and hate, but I have to say I don't think any have ever done it as poorly as Forsaken. Things start so strongly with that incredibly chaotic spawn before teleporting into the main portion of the map, but it's honestly that early on where things start to fall apart. From this point onwards, players are subjected to what could well be one of the most dull and boring layouts of all time. Forsaken just essentially feels like one long line of streets from the start to the observation tower where players can find the pack-a-punch. It's something very rarely seen in COD Zombies, and for good reason, because it just doesn't work. To put it simply, it's not fun. It's a huge chore to have to trek through this map, but annoyingly the decision about how you make your way around this experience even feels like it's not really in your hands. And that is because this isn't even a play space you can traverse by just running to wherever you want. Forsaken is broken up into a number of sections using teleporters, which some may see as a useful time saver. However, to me it doesn't really feel like that at all. It comes across as more of a lazy feature to link the areas together with minimal effort, or perhaps even a last-minute choice due to constraints put on the development team as Cold War came to a close. You can get access to zip lines, which do make getting back to the observation tower a little bit easier, but that doesn't really change the fact that it honestly doesn't feel like a very cohesive play space at all. I don't necessarily think that without the teleporters, Forsaken would suddenly turn into something much better than it currently is, because at the end of the day, that wouldn't fix what is just a fundamentally poorly planned out system. However, their inclusion in the experience just sadly serves to add even more negativity towards what is already a very weak play space. And this isn't helped by what many fans, including myself, see as a really poor atmosphere and vibe in Forsaken. Just like many other parts of this experience, everything starts incredibly well in that spawn area, with this dark, grim and yet somehow visually stunning section kicking things off in a great way, leaving many of us with the question, what the hell happened with the rest of the map? Now, to be clear, the idea of a retro American style town enclosed in a military base is in no way a bad idea for a zombies experience. In fact, to me it's the exact opposite. It had the potential to be phenomenal and incredibly unique, but that level of quality can only really be reached when the atmosphere aligns perfectly with everything else, and that definitely doesn't happen in Forsaken, because there just isn't an atmosphere at all. The juxtaposition between the spawn area and the rest of the map is pretty eye-opening. It's like they're taken from two entirely different experiences. It makes no sense. The lack of atmosphere in Forsaken probably stands out even more obviously because we had just arrived here from the absolutely incredible Mauer de Toten, which mood and vibe wise was easily the best in Cold War and honestly could be one of the best ever. The drop in quality from one map to the next just sadly makes things feel even worse here, which is a genuine shame because if done well this map theme could have been great, but as it stands it just doesn't really match up to a lot of higher quality experiences. It never really feels like you're taking on anything intimidating or creepy whatsoever with Forsaken. That could possibly be because a lot of the content here is ripped straight from the campaign. And yeah, sure, that is often the case with a lot of experiences and the content used within them, but here it just feels so much more obvious because it doesn't mesh well with the vibe of zombies whatsoever. So unfortunately just ends up leaving us with a map that feels out of place and as if it's just genuinely been transplanted from another mode into the world of zombies. Sadly, things don't really get much better with the Easter egg either. I will say though, there is a positive here. It's not the worst Easter egg of all time, probably not even close to be honest. However, it's certainly not good either. It has a couple of cool steps such as the fuel processing lockdown which can get pretty hectic, but the best is easily the final escort step before the boss fight. This actually feels different and much more like a classic Easter egg step even if it's not that difficult. But I'm sorry, a couple of fairly decent steps across the whole of a map's Easter egg is not enough to stop it being anything other than underwhelming. And worse, it's just way too easy. It's a common theme across the whole of Cold War that the main quests are quite clearly designed largely for a much more casual audience. But if you're able to jump into a zombies experience with little to no knowledge of the map and manage to complete the Easter egg on your first try, then it's just way too easy, it's that simple. If that's something that's honestly possible with a main quest, then to be honest, it probably doesn't even meet its goal of exciting a casual audience because it's very likely even they will manage to do it on their first attempt. And so why are they going to be jumping back into Forsaken where they've already accomplished what many people would call the main goal of the map? This is clearly a much broader problem with Cold War than just a Forsaken issue, where the Easter eggs, not including Mauer de Toten of course, are just far too easy and offer very little challenge for people more familiar with zombies' main quests. And these kind of issues are also present with the map's boss fight. So who exactly is the huge climactic boss fight to wrap up Cold War zombies in Forsaken? Yeah, it's kind of in the name, it's the Forsaken. I feel like that's obvious, no? One thing I will say in favour of this final encounter is it's big, over the top, and comes across as a very grand conclusion. But outside of that, I'm sorry to say that it just doesn't reach the heights of what I would describe as a genuinely good COD Zombies boss fight. Is it better than D Machine? Yes. Is it better than Firebase Z? Yes, probably, but only just. But let's face it, that's not really something to shout about, as one of those isn't even really a boss fight and the other simply involves spraying the order repeatedly in the face until it's over. Very much like the map's Easter egg, it just doesn't offer a huge challenge to a large number of players, and for the supposedly climactic finale of the Cold War story, is that really good enough? Not in my opinion. I definitely don't want to sound like a huge hater, it's honestly not terrible and has some cool steps such as having to charge the cannons by eliminating zombies so you can damage the boss after wiping out his shields. But many fans would agree it's not a final encounter that they return to repeatedly because it's so much fun to do. It just doesn't have that major pull like many other great boss fights such as Terminus or 9. And the major reason for that is it is just ridiculously easy. If you thought the Easter egg was on the more casual side, then this fight takes that to the next level. As long as you know what you're doing, then it provides pretty much no challenge and can be completed in a matter of minutes. It truly feels like a shame that this visually impressive yet sadly disappointingly simple boss fight is the final fight to round off Cold War. But I suppose they did at least stick with a theme across most of the game, totally underwhelming boss fights. Fortunately though, the end of this encounter does actually lead to something very cool. It's got to be said that although there are many glaring issues with this map, at least the final outro cutscene that is designed to wrap up Cold War Zombies is good. Tying off numerous plot lines, teasing things for the future, and even giving players an awesome reveal showcasing that none other than Edward Richtofen was the mysterious director all along. But once again, just like so many times with this frustrating map, this is kind of where the positives end. Now it's not like the rest of the story for Forsaken is awful, it's not, it's just serviceable, it does exactly what you'd expect. However, I'm sorry to say that it offers some of the cringiest dialogue in COD Zombies history. Let me give you the best possible comparison that I can. This right here is heartfelt, engaging, and downright tragic character acting.
I have been witness to miracles and calamities. I want to be me. Someone who can also hard work.
And this is, well, I don't really know what this is right here.
This is not your world to take! You will not consume this world! Not as long as I am here! I am a good soul! This is the only way.
I appreciate that Aether is considered the peak of COD Zombies, and of course Blood of the Dead had some of the best voice acting in the franchise's history, but it doesn't really make this hurt any less. How can you take the conclusion to the first chapter of Dark Aether seriously when supposedly impactful cutscenes come across as this cheesy? I think also we can agree that although visually pretty cool, the reveal of Zykov actually being the Forsaken is a shock to pretty much no one, even if you're playing the map years after release with no prior knowledge. It just feels like a lot of the story in Forsaken and the supposedly shocking reveals unfortunately fall very flat. It's not necessarily that the story being told is awful, it's not. The Dark Ether is genuinely interesting and Cold War certainly set the stage for Black Ops 6. But the problem is the way in which the narrative is shown to players in this map is just really not good. It feels a lot more like a comedy B-movie than a truly serious, emotionally impactful saga, like we've had in previous versions of Zombies. Luckily this would of course take a much more serious turn in Black Ops 6, but in terms of Forsaken it definitely didn't meet my expectations and fell very short of the great setup that it was given with Mauer de Toten. It's no secret that Forsaken was considered a massively controversial final experience in the initial chapter of Dark Ether, with fans loving certain things about it whilst absolutely hating others. But it leaves us with one final question: is it truly the worst map in Cold War Zombies? In my eyes, Forsaken is very much a tale of wasted potential, and in many ways that is more frustrating than an experience that is just flat out awful. It possesses some genuinely brilliant content such as the map's wonder weapon, the Chrysalax, and the arcade token system, which are up there with the coolest things in the whole of Cold War. The tragedy is they're trapped behind a completely underwhelming and quite frankly poorly thought out experience. I believe it's no exaggeration to say that this map's layout could well be one of the worst in COD Zombies history, and even what's there in my opinion isn't even really fully playable. The space is split up into smaller sections that have to be accessed through various teleporters, which truly comes across as an extremely lazy feature, used to hide either a lack of care or shortage of time given to developers in order to finish the map to Treyarch's usually high standards. When you combine this with Forsaken's poor quality atmosphere, it unfortunately just doesn't offer much replayability and really does not match the top tier aesthetics showcased in many older classic Zombies maps and even other Cold War experiences. There are glimpses of something genuinely good in here that peek through at various points when playing, but as quickly as you see and enjoy them, they're gone, replaced by weaker content that has sadly not stood the test of time. There have certainly been many COD Zombies maps over the years that are far weaker than Forsaken, as it definitely does not descend to the depths of the most hated experiences of all time. But in terms of what's available in Cold War, is it really the worst map? I would have to say yes, absolutely, and it's not really even that close.